It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome, niceties, blah, blah, blah. He's Gary, blah, blah. I'm Eric. It's Wednesday, blah, blah, blah. Listen, we started the show. We don't know where you guys were, but we started the show, I don't know, a long time ago, years ago.
I'm reading this article. Arnold Schwarzenegger scolds environmentalists dismayed by Trump. Said, look, most of these things are done at the state and local level, so stop whining and get to work, Democrats.
Listen to me. I don't want to hear any complaining there.
No whining. Get
Shut
to
the
work.
fridge door. Quit looking in the fridge. It's making you fat.
Now,
Stop it with that.
The only reason I did that story was so Eric would do Arnold.
Listen to me. The other day, I was sharing my Swiffer with the maid, and I was, trying to get things cleaned up. That's what we do around here. Don't go in there. There's a refrigerator in there.
I wouldn't.
It's going to make you fat.
Did you mention the maid? I think I'd move on from that.
Oh, wait a minute. What? I just needed a place to park my Hummer. It was a big, big project. Everybody knows this and all the other innuendos. Listen.
The places I could go with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go there.
Well, I was just talking about when he expanded his house. We have a friend who lived next to him, and he bought the house. I don't know if he still lives there after the divorce. Maybe Maria got that in the divorce. I don't know. But they bought the house next door and annexed the two houses. I just need a larger place to park the Hummer. I'm going to have it there. Don't go in there. There's a bomb in there.
I think I need to move on.
I was the governor of California.
I will say this before we get to anything. Climate homicide.
Yeah.
We're going to have to remember that. I saw that buzzword today being used now.
Climate
homicide.
Climate homicide.
Yes. We'll get to that coming up on the show.
All
but
right.
Hey, at least we're talking about cutting.
Yeah. Again, yeah.
Yeah.
Since
I became a talk show host in 1989.
No one's going to do anything about it. You know, it's like the guy at the bar that's just sitting there telling you that if he ever got in a fight, how he would, kick the other guy's butt, right? He would, well, what I do first is blah, blah, and what I do first is blah, 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 blah. And then, okay, it's only talk. It's not going to go anywhere. Thank goodness. We don't condone violence. It's a ridiculous conversation more and more. And I didn't think that with the advent of Doge. Hope was renewed for about 10 minutes. It was like, man, if anything, we're having a conversation. But then I was reminded, by history, that the conversation always goes nowhere. That people talk tough, and then when you get down to the votes, it's like, oh, yeah, no, we're gonna still vote for more spending.
Well, the problem with this is I have to agree here with Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
The problem with Musk is he gave false hope to a political class that doesn't want to cut anything.
Well, no, I mean, it really is true because
how I read that was what you said was we don't want to cut anything, and he's saying we can cut stuff without affecting anybody's benefits. Well,
right.
That's the gold deal.
Right
there. I mean,
right. I mean, it was
that's the gold standard.
That's the unicorn. If it were true, if they had found things that you could cut without anyone being affected, then that was a no-brainer. You and I were like, come on, why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Well, because in the end, It was a unicorn. We could us fiscal conservatives could probably go in, look at the budget, and go, "Oh my gosh, look at what we're spending. We shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be." In fact, you and I kind of do that for a living. We look at things, and you remember the pork book that used to come out?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I used to.
First time I saw it, I thought, "Oh my gosh, is this how you shop for bacon?" And it wasn't.
No.
But I was a young talk show host then. I was like, "Oh, okay, it has nothing to do with breakfast," but the spending on those things, and we would always talk radio in general, conservative talk radio, would go through those ridiculous items in order to bring about that conversation. For you youngsters, that's what viral was before. We would have a conversation on the radio. A lot of people would talk about it. There was this great man named Rush Limbaugh, and he was the one of the forefathers of what we do, and was good about making things go viral. Those conversations happen. And I loved those conversations when there were more of us that cared. I loved those conversations when you go back to your very first, was it the first major event, the very first issue when you were a talk show host?
First major event when I was a talk show host.
1989.
Yeah, and it was called it was called
Big
something.
Sweep?
Clean Sweep,
The
something
Clean
like
Sweep,
that.
yeah.
It was, my listeners had said you got to show up for it. And it was actually pretty funny because all over the country they were outside congressional offices and people had brooms. Make it a clean sweep. If you're not for cutting the budget, you're gone.
88, 89, somewhere in there.
It would have been 89, 90.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And it led to the Swiffer shortage of 1990. Because everybody bought up all their brooms. Yeah, listen to me. Let's talk about the Swiffer again. But these days, it's this futile effort that seems to be propping the ballads, right? The support during election season, and then you get in and it's like, But there's no one crying right now. This is the thing. Only fiscal conservatives, and we're a small group now, the rank and file. There's only a small group of us that's really angry about this. When we go back to TARP 1, we go back to the Tea Party. We go back to these things where voices were loud. And it was enough to have people listen. Now, did it do anything long term? No. But there were enough voices to stop TARP 1. Ultimately, they got stuff through, and they did things that they shouldn't have done, but we didn't know what they were doing at the time and why they were doing it. We found out later. And now you have a situation where it's, we're back to just talking about what we spend money, taxpayer money on, and we just go through our day. Well, it doesn't matter. Is my phone still working? Can I still watch Netflix? Is everything still on at my house?
Well, I did find it, by the way. AI had it, Google AI. In the 1990s, Clean Sweep was used in protests related to government spending, taxes, and the need for reform. So I did have it right. My memory hasn't gone completely.
All right.
One notable example involved protest against higher taxes and government spending, where demonstrators used brooms as a symbol of their call for a clean sweep of the government. It might have been the beginning of April of 1990. So I would have been a talk show host for like 6 months at that point.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm just saying April of 1990 because that, April 15th.
Yeah. When tax season comes about, everybody's paying their taxes.
Yeah.
What are we spending all this money on? That thing.
Right. Yeah. So the demonstrators used brooms as a symbol. The protests were often organized by groups advocating for limiting government spending and a hold on federal taxes. In 1990, there it is, nationwide demonstrations were organized by the Council for Citizens Against Government Waste to protest higher taxes and government spending. Demonstrators often used brooms and signs reading, "Time for a Clean Sweep," to symbolize their call for reform and to remove what they perceived as wasteful government spending. Protests occurred in various cities across the country, including Chicago and Niagara Falls. That's where I went. And demonstrators waved brooms and carried signs. It was actually, like I said, it was hilarious because there were steps leading up to the congressional office, the local congressional office, and it was there were some older listeners. There were older women listeners, and I'd say they were probably in their 70s, and they had, they had like long traditional dresses on, whatever.
Right.
And they had all these people with brooms. It was almost as if you look back, it was like, oh, so the maids are sweeping off the front step here. I mean, that's what it looked like. Everybody, and they were laughing.
Yeah,
Everybody was dying laughing because
right.
it was just, so funny.
Well, knowing
but
that
me,
that would go,
that
version of viral in the news would happen, the local news covering it and all that. Yeah.
But that is the last protest that I remember, last national protest that's ever happened for the debt, unless you want to include, the Tea Party.
Yeah, which was April of 2009.
Right.
So that whole idea, and that was just part of the Tea Party, but that, was a big part of it. But yeah, that's, you and I started hearing it after the Tea Party was already in place. We started hearing from people who say they were conservative. That's all we can go by. Who claim they were conservative and telling us, though, we need to revisit single-payer system. That we need to revisit it, and it's like, you can't possibly be, well, no, I'm a conservative, and well, you're talking about massive bloat of government, but ultimately the takeover long-term of that chunk of the economy, which was the goal of the left, and if you share that goal of the left or support that goal of the left, even if mentally you don't share that goal, but that's where it's going, then you're on the left.
Nobody can claim purity here, and we're talking about Elon Musk coming out and calling the big, beautiful bill an abomination. Said, I'm sorry, I just cannot stand it anymore. I saw this, I'm like, okay, show's done. I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. Well, the Wall Street Journal went after Elon Musk. Trying to make the point that nobody is pure here. It said the House bill does avoid a $4.5 trillion tax hike next year and cut spending by some $1.5 trillion over 10 years by making some useful reforms to Medicaid, student loans, and food stamps. It also ends most of the Inflation Reduction Act's green energy subsidies. But Mr. Musk doesn't want to eliminate that pork. There is no change to tax incentives for oil and gas, just EV solar, he said on X.com last week, retweeting another user post that said slashing solar energy credits is unjust, but what's more unjust is the damage that is done to people's lives during storms and blackouts, because ultimately you can't replace a human life. This is a part of the whole climate homicide thing.
Yeah.
Mr. Musk is parroting the climate lobby's specious claim the tax breaks like depreciation that are available to all manufacturers are a special benefit for the oil and gas industry. But it's rich that he's denouncing the House bill for not cutting spending enough while also fuming that it kills green energy tax credits as if they are a matter of life and death for Tesla. And he writes, Tesla Energy, its batteries and solar division, tweeted last week that abruptly ending the energy tax credits would threaten America's energy independence and the reliability of our grid. We urge the Senate to enact legislation with the sensible wind down, which refers to tax credits for residential and large-scale clean energy products. Both credits are important for Tesla, which derives an increasing share of its revenue and profit from selling solar and battery systems to homeowners and utilities, but the House bill waits until 2030 to phase out a tax credit for battery production, which benefits Tesla's electric vehicles and storage businesses. The Senate should end it sooner. Mr. Musk has done yeoman's work trying to reduce federal bureaucracy, improve how government works. He's right that both parties in Congress are spendthrifts, but one reason for that is because whenever Congress tries to cut something, special interests scream, as Mr. Musk is doing over green subsidies. If the House bill fails, there won't be any cuts, only a huge tax increase. Is that what Elon wants?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Well, that's the entire point. And he's making the wrong argument. He's making the argument that the oil and natural gas are tax credits, and they're not.
Right. No, they're not.
Tax credits are where you actually give cash.
Right.
You give cash to people. It's not okay, you've earned whatever, depreciation for things that you buy that is for all businesses out there. He's trying to make the case, and it's false.
Right. Right.
That's how desperate he wants his subsidies. So there is no purity here. Nobody is pure in this argument.
There isn't. Well, again, he's trying to create a unicorn in himself. He's kind of stepped out of the role that he was in, and as advisor for the president, and they had that last meeting the other day, still wondering about the black eye. And he then goes on this rant, but there isn't any purity.
No.
Look, we can look at across the top and probably find enough room for cuts. Just 1%, 1/10 of 1% in real cuts, but it's never going to happen in our lifetime. I'm convinced.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Hi there, this is Hope Zavara with Mother Trucker Yoga, and here's your health tip of the day. Healthy driver, healthy diesel, powered by House. Truck drivers are at high risk for carpal tunnel and grip issues from long hours at the wheel, leading to pain, stiffness, and weakness over time. Let's fix that right at the wheel. Using your steering wheel, stretch one finger at a time, starting from your thumb to your pinky. Hold each of those for 10 seconds. Then place all 4 fingers on the wheel and gently press and stretch your palm and wrist. Hold for another 10 seconds. Don't forget to do the other hand. Do this 2 to 3 times a day to keep your hands mobile, strong, and ready for action. There you go. Small, simple changes that can lead to big results so you can feel good again. Visit mothertruckeryoga.com and houseproducts.com for more tips and support.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Coming up on the bottom of the hour, the back and forth going on about the BBB.
Yeah.
Big,
beautiful bill.
Beautiful bill.
Yeah. Yes. Not the Better Business Bureau.
Yes. Every time I see the BBB, I think the Better Business Bureau. That's what I'm thinking of, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or the
triple B.
Or as we're calling it, the big, it has a nice personality bill.
The big, hey, we could be friends bill. The big, not my type bill.
The big with plenty of benefits for friends bill.
Yes. The big no benefits for any friends bill. Oh my gosh!
Well,
yeah,
I say the benefits because of the stuff that we'll, you could do it both ways. So, but it's really interesting. The Axios story. You should see the Axios story about Scott Bessent.
Yeah,
telling Elon Musk, "You're a fraud. You promised $2 trillion in cuts. You promised $1 trillion, then $500 billion, then $150 million. You're a fraud."
Yeah,
that's the report from Axios. We'll get to that and a whole bunch more.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. This is from Axios reporter Mark Caputo talking about, because it was, when I saw the Elon Musk thing yesterday, I said, he's furious at people inside the administration. He's absolutely
clearly.
He's absolutely livid.
Yeah.
Well, Axios has reported that Musk and the Treasury Secretary Bessent went at it in right outside the Oval Office. And here's his report on that.
But early on, he clashed with Marco Rubio and the FAA, or better said, the DOT administrator, Sean Duffy. And then he had this big blow-up, which we first reported at Axios, with Scott Bessent in the White House, outside of the Oval Office, a screaming match. One of the things I didn't report in there, which I guess we can just use as a bonus to the War Room faithful, is that during that shouting match between Elon Musk and Scott Bessent, I think in April, Scott Bessent told him, "You're a fraud. You promised $2 billion, $2 trillion in cuts. Then it was $1 trillion. Then it was $500 billion. Now it's only $150 million. You're a fraud." And then Elon Musk apparently shot back at him, saying that Bessent had run a failed hedge fund, and on and on and on. But that was a really personal encounter, and Bessent had more allies on his side and in the cabinet, and ultimately with Donald Trump.
Well, it was, remember, it was somebody who asked the question about the check and, about the check. And remember, Elon Musk was the one who first came out with the $5,000 Doge check. But the administration jumped on it. Trump jumped on it. They all jumped on it. And it doesn't matter. He worked for you. And so anything that comes from him, it said, they had the back and forth going on. But if there was, if Bessent thought he was a fraud, did Bessent tell, if this story is true, did Bessent tell Trump that and say, you've got to dump this guy?
It appears that there was something going on. You and I talked about it when the promises of, $2 trillion, $1.5 trillion, $500 billion, $150 billion. Early on, very early on.
And we were criticized.
Well, and we said, look, because when he was talking the $4 billion a day, he kept repeating, no one would be affected by it.
Yeah.
Well, you and I knew immediately that's not real. That doesn't exist. Could you find $4 billion a day to cut? I don't know. But people would, if you did, there would definitely be an effect of it. And that's where you get into the political back and forth and the political will to actually do the deed. And we said, you're sending this, kind of what Bannon said. You're sending this, and we said it right away. You're sending this to Capitol Hill, and we're not hearing anything from Capitol Hill for a reason, because they're calling it BS. Nobody believes you're finding $4 billion a day.
That you've currently found $4 billion a day.
Exactly.
That was the message being sent.
Right.
We are currently cutting $4 billion
$4 billion a day.
And you and I
and
went.
There was zero, nothing coming from Capitol Hill, which told you they were calling BS on it. And, the way Steve Bannon put it, you're giving false hopes to lawmakers, to the GOP on Capitol Hill. Well,
you're giving false hope to people that don't want to cut.
Yeah, that's. I'm sorry, that's an important distinction.
Yes,
what he actually said, because that second part is also very important to point out. And they don't. But if you could do it, again, unicorn land. Oh well, yeah, okay, then great, and nobody's affected, and everybody gets a check. This is the thing, is that we want to live in that fantasy world. We want to live in a world where Tom Cruise is a skilled Navy pilot, but also works for a clandestine organization. We want the Top Gun in Mission Impossible all in one. We want everything.
Well,
we want the entire package, but we don't ever want to do the deed. We don't ever want to go through the work anymore as a society to get it done. And then when you have something like this, and this goes back to bringing him on, that's fine. But if you're going to repeat the promises or repeat the idea of, hey, we could write you a check, then what he's saying has to be vetted, which means all of that has to come through your office. If he reports directly to you, and he does, or did at the time, then all of that has to be vetted through your office. So there has to be, a better process in place of saying, you don't say anything to the media until we decide what the talking points on this are going to be.
Well, that was part of the stuff that, he wasn't throwing stuff by Susie Wiles.
Exactly.
And, but when this was sort of the same time, because remember, it was the $2 trillion, and then it was the $5,000 Doge check. And to me, it was around the same time, again, maybe in the same few weeks, that you had the Republicans waiving the file, the Jeffrey Epstein file, like we have something.
Yeah.
And it was all this hype of these incredible things we're going to do, and then everything just falls apart.
Yeah.
It's like, how the hell do you get to that point? By the way, next time, read what's in the folder before you start throwing it up that we've got it, we've delivered on our promise,
Right.
Because that was, when you oversell and underdeliver, which has happened here, and you get so excited and so hyped up. This is where I said at the time, to you, what my dad always said, because we were criticized for saying, you're not going to get $2 trillion in cuts. You're not going to get $1 trillion in cuts. You'd be lucky if you get $100 billion. Well, and we're talking about overall in the entire reducing the size of the budget. Now we know that's zero.
Right.
Because the budget will increase.
Right.
Drastically what the debt will be from the baseline of what it is right now. But I go back to what Dad said. People love to be BS, and we had some of those people calling us and furious at us for not jumping aboard and saying $2 trillion possible, $1 trillion possible. Yeah. Sorry, we don't buy BS. We understand the budget. These are things that we've studied, for God's sakes, for almost 40 years. We know what it is, and we know what the parameters are. And we knew there wasn't going to be a $5,000 Doge check, and we were criticized for saying it. Whenever I do this, I get people, all you do is sit on your show and tell people where you're right. Yeah, not because we're geniuses, but because we're not idiots and we don't buy BS.
We think everybody should actually see this.
Yeah. It's not like, these guys are really, accountants or whatever. No, you can do it with a pen and a pencil. You can figure it out.
Oh, I feel like Captain Obvious when I'm saying some of these things.
It's no great feat.
Right.
It's simply, we don't want to be BS'd and won't be BS'd by anybody.
Right.
It's that simple.
Right.
And there was a ton of BS coming out of the administration about what they, could do there, and they couldn't do it. And they're not going to do it, even if they get the rescissions. It's not going to do anything. It's going to be a drop in the Gulf of America.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And so, like I said, what happens here? Again, people aren't looking. This is something, though. You and I said this during the campaign with Trump. Why is he promoting bringing Elon Musk? Because this was before the election was done. He was talking about, we're going to cut. And you and I looked at each other and we said, I'm glad they're bringing it up. But we said, the public's not asking for it.
Right.
The public isn't asking for it.
Right.
And then you come in and $2 trillion in cuts. Everybody's going to get a check and everything else. And then it ends up, well, no, none of that's going to be true. In fact, you're going to be spending a lot more over the next 10 years.
Right.
Yep. That's self-inflicted. There was nobody coming to you and saying you need to massively. I mean, there was Rand Paul. There were a few conservatives. And not that it's something you shouldn't do and look at, but the fact that if it became such a pinnacle before the during the campaign, then after the election, that here's what we're going to do. And my God, you're not going to believe it because it's so easy to do it.
It wasn't a major driver in the election.
No, it wasn't.
And that's not a good thing. We don't say that with any joy.
No.
It should be a major driver in every election, but it's not anymore.
And then Scott Bessent, in a moment of honesty here, it's something that we've talked about, but it gets back to Keynesian economics.
Yeah.
And the fact of how important government spending is to the GDP.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
I'm a fiscal hawk, but I am also a realist. And the way to think about this is every $300 billion is 1% of GDP. And as the clip that you just said, or you just showed, where I said we didn't get here in a year, we're not going to get out of it in a year, that we have to bring this down gradually because we want to do two things. We want to cut and constrain spending, and we want to grow the economy.
There you go, right there. And the $300 billion is, he's talking about government spending. That government spending, and this is why you and I, when they revised how they did government, how they did the GDP back 10 years ago, where the transfer of money, not actually wealth being created, affects the GDP. And you and I looked at it and we go, no, we don't like this because it helps hide. There's less transparency in the GDP.
Right.
And they admit it. We know that during election times before, you've had massive defense spending in order to pump up the GDP before an election.
Yep. Save it until that quarter or two before the election, and then boom.
And so the whole point is, well, if we say let's give $300 billion back, to the taxpayer, let's actually cut the budget. Well, all you're doing is cutting the deficit. You're not really putting that money back into the private sector immediately because of the horrible fiscal policy you've had. And even if it did go back to the private sector, it'd take a little bit more time to show the growth, which would be more growth because it's for productive purposes, which is profit-making purposes. But the fact is, we can borrow and spend the money now and increase the GDP right now.
Right.
So he admitted, basically, Bessent to me admitted what Democrats have promoted for years. Let's do massive government spending. Doesn't matter whether we borrow it because we'll help increase the GDP right now, and that looks good.
Right.
It's not the same economic growth that you get out of capital being used for productive purposes in the private sector, but they don't care. As long as it shows the GDP goes up with government spending, then they look good.
Well, and he said he's a fiscal hawk, but he's a realist.
Yeah.
No, you're a political realist.
Yes.
And that's not being a realist.
Right. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. And we're where we suspected you possibly could be weeks ago when you look at the big, beautiful bill. You saw John Thune saying, no, we're not going to make many changes. All this will mirror exactly, very much like what it is in the House, which makes sense for him saying that because I don't think it'll pass. If they don't, then you have other Republican senators coming out saying, no, we've got to make major cuts here and then send it back to the Senate or send it back to the House.
Yeah.
That's exactly where we thought we probably would be at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it's going. I mean, I would suspect that, you've got till July 4th. You wait 2 weeks. Elon Musk isn't an issue anymore. He really doesn't want to be in the limelight because of Tesla. And then you just push the bill through, whatever it is. And then you move on to something else. I just don't see any type of major cuts coming.
No.
And I hope I'm wrong.
Oh, I'll celebrate being wrong. Yeah. But I don't think we're going to see it in my lifetime. This was that last gasp, the whole Doge thing, because again, it was something that was not a big political driver, didn't need to be a political promise because most of the rank and file, even on the right, I mean, that's who Trump was trying to get, were really not concerned about it. And that's not a good thing. But then with Doge coming in and all of this, and it was like, yeah, the euphoria. And I was like, wow, maybe this is going to happen. At least we're having a conversation. Oh, it's going like it's always gone. And here we are. And that's just where we are as a nation until, and I don't see this ever happening. I don't know what would turn it around. The pathology of dependency has won forever with most people. And that's where we are as a nation. I don't know what turns that around.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning.
Hello.
How's everybody doing? You know what was really interesting yesterday? I want to get back a little bit to the BBB here in a couple of seconds, a big, beautiful bill. But
yeah.
It was interesting yesterday that where Democrats were trying to go. First off, this was all over social media, more than it was even reported. Because I really think it's funny because I don't think the media is even picking up on anything the Democrats are focusing on. I think they look at it and go, okay, this isn't effective. Let's not do it. I think they're actually trying to be biased in the way of not promoting what the Democrats are saying out there. Yeah. And you had Goldman out there. Dan Goldman was out there making the rounds, and in Congress they were talking about the fact that these ICE agents are wearing masks, and they're wearing masks, and this is like. This is just this is Nazism. It's everything because they're wearing masks. We know why they're wearing masks.
Yeah,
because the left wishes to identify them, and then threaten them. Mm-hmm. We understand. And on the same day that they're trying to go after the Republicans for saying, "Well, there's threats against these district judges."
Yeah. Yeah.
There isn't anybody. There's one Republican advocating what's going on. We'll get to some of the stuff Ted Cruz just pounding on Cory Booker yesterday, saying, "Excuse me." There were people protesting, and we know there was somebody who tried to assassinate a Supreme Court justice. You weren't out there every day screaming that it had to stop. You weren't going after the Attorney General of during the Biden administration. You weren't saying you need to stop this. You need to arrest these people. They're breaking the law. The Democrats said nothing. But I was thinking, wow, those are the two things that they're really trying to hit. And I saw yesterday they were throwing out the same thing again. I think it was Swalwell who threw out again, "We're deporting babies." We know that's false.
Yep.
And I really wonder if even the left is actually looking at the Democratic Party and saying, we can't cover that. That hurts you. Don't you understand? You're hurting yourself. We can't. I really wonder if they're to that point saying, come on, Democrats, get on board. I did see an article yesterday saying, I think it was a National Review, Democrats want to go back to pretending that they're Democrats, which you and I have said all the time. They're trying to pretend that they have to go to the middle. Well, not pretend. They're trying to pretend that they're middle of the road.
They're pretending to pretend.
Yes, they're pretending to pretend.
And it's and yet again, on many fronts, they are fighting for all of the radical things that won't change. They're not going to turn around and say, okay, we're going to, in this state, we're going to stop doing this and we're going to. No. For the handful that have come out and said, well, we need to moderate, we need to come to the middle, we need to blah, 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 blah. What they're actually saying is we need to change the message. We need to go back to lying.
Yeah.
We need to go back to not owning what we believe in, while the radical part of that group, which is most of them, are saying, because if you support them in any way, if you're voting for them, then that makes you a radical. You may say, well, I don't agree with them here and there, but if you still vote for them and keep them in power, then you're a radical. And the radicals don't want to hear anything else. The loudest of them don't want to hear anything about going to the middle. What would that even look like? You know, they're losing the battle on men and women's sports more and more because of all the viral things that are happening in it. And it's great that we're seeing more and more women in women's sports. And I think Riley Gaines there has been just so great in being a vocal part of that herself from her experience.
You just said, but I love it. I'm very happy to see more women in women's sports.
Yeah, right. Isn't that great? It's a good
thing.
We've
really moved forward as a country.
We're against murder, and we're for women in women's sports.
Yes, we're for more women in women's sports.
But the women in women's sports are standing up, and more. You saw it over the weekend. You saw it. You're seeing it play out more and more. And I believe it's going to continue to go that way. That actually was the women's issue for 2024, not abortion. You can measure it. The bigger driver there was men in women's sports, and women wanted to put a stop to that. So that's a good thing. These are positives. But it's not for the left. They're not going to. What they think is the radicals think we need to be, Tim Walz, we need to be meaner toward Trump because they haven't been mean enough.
They've been too nice.
You know, they had just been coddling him this whole time.
Exactly.
You know, propping him up and whatnot, sending him chocolates. It's when they go into that mode of, and the same guy, Tim Walz, I could beat up, basically saying he could beat up half of America. Let's calm down, Tim. But that's how they think.
But he couldn't.
No.
That's the thing. We never talked about.
Unless there's some kind of new taekwondo that involves jazz hands that I don't know about.
We never talked about the truthfulness of that statement. Now, again, it's tough to figure out the truthfulness of a statement when it's this is what I could do in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, I have a feeling that I could be wrong here, but I have this feeling that Walz is not a great fighter.
He doesn't come off as one. It's but the mentality of going to that place. Yeah, and then the other day when he was trying to, I don't know, in a weird way, he was talking about how the Kamala Harris campaign fell short, but he was saying she promoted joy. You're talking about beating people up and being meaner to Donald Trump. What joy, dude? There was never any joy to begin with.
Remember when they were on the joy kick?
Right, it was right around the convention.
I remember
joy.
The joy kick.
The joy. And all the weird smiles on their faces.
Oh, it was so bad.
It was horrible.
We're all about joy. We're all about joy.
Joy.
We're all about
joy. Everybody smile.
Joy.
Hey, Hillary, look really surprised when those balloons drop, would ya? Remember that whole
Yeah.
thing? It's this, listen, we've said for a long time. In fact, we may be partially, if not fully, responsible for them owning it. We said years ago, you need to own it if you're on the left. If you're a Democrat, you need to you need to promote what you want, where you really stand. 2008, Barack Obama could not say that he believed in gay marriage.
He did.
He did,
Right.
but he couldn't say it.
He lied about it.
And then he grappled, in a thoughtful way, because he hovers like a god, Evan Thomas. And that's how for years, this big, massive BS campaign. Now, they still lie. They just lie about what the right is doing. Swalwell saying they're deporting babies. Still saying they're deporting babies.
Yeah. Who with cancer.
Right.
Which is not true.
But that's Swalwell. That's who he is to the core. Anymore, they don't lie about their agenda. They want to go in there full on with what they want, and they shouldn't lie about their agenda.
And maybe with Swalwell, based on his relationships, may have a different opinion on certain immigrants in this country.
Well, let's just say, if there was somebody that wanted to come here from, we always pick
China,
the countries here in North America. Let's say China.
Yeah.
Let's say someone wanted to come here from China as a Chinese national. You'd have to wonder, first thing is, well, could that person be a spy?
Right.
Why don't you date them first to find out? Next thing you know, they're floating balloons over Montana.
Wow, that was, my God.
Seriously.
You're bringing up stuff here. You're making me like, this is
like a weird.
This is like classic rock. Like, wow, I remember that song.
Yeah, and when you go back to it, it's like a weird series on Netflix that you can't stop watching. And you say to you, I remember years ago, my oldest daughter, Dad, are you watching House of Cards on Netflix? Back when people liked Kevin Spacey. And I said, yeah, I watched some of it, but it's really fake and over the top. The whole Beltway thing isn't like that. And I thought, fast forward to 2025, House of Cards is lame compared to reality. Are you kidding me? My gosh. It's, if you look back at everything in recent years that has happened, the whole auto pen thing, and we'll get into the Ducey thing here in a bit. And was this an auto pen here? Was this on the pardons? And that entire, I don't know. I don't know how far you could go back. I think you could keep going back and find bizarre stuff. But it got more bizarre in the later years, more and more bizarre, because we were finding out who the left actually is and how they actually think. That same Swalwell, parents don't have a place in the kids' classroom. You're arrogant to think that you have a place in your kids' learning environment. My gosh, this is who they are. And we've known it for a long time. Conservatives have known it for a long time. People that do what you and I do, Gary, have known it for a long time, since back in the 1900s. And it is, though, I think it is an awakening by many, and we saw that in November of 2024. This is where, still by comparison, we can talk about the spending, but politically, the spending issue is not, for most people, not a concern. It will be one day when we can no longer service the interest on the debt.
Well,
but on the issues, the left is still radical. And will be.
It's not an issue, but if you were going to promote, Doge, and we always said they should focus on the fact of And they never really did.
Mm-hmm.
They did when it happened, but they should have, I think, focused a little bit more on the fact of the American public. And this is what Republicans should be doing. Look, we felt what debt has done to us, the inflation. We know what spending and debt does. And that's something that relates to the American public. And I think the Republicans in general have failed on that particular message. I wanted to say that last hour, but you just reminded me of it right now, that that's something that you do, because you always want to focus on what people have felt. Because when we started feeling inflation, the American public, remember the polling? Maybe we shouldn't be spending as much. Americans were there. You had them because there was a direct consequence of that spending that people felt each and every day.
Right.
They saw it. They felt it. And that's, I think, how it should be promoted, because you're not going to. I wish that the American public would respond to the fact of the most immoral thing we do domestically is put what we want today on future generations. Yeah. Every conservative understands the whole concept of taxation without representation. That's why we exist as a country today when you think about it. That's one of the major reasons we exist. One of the major reasons we had the fallout with Great Britain. Well, every conservative knows that we found the loophole. We have taxation without representation. We just go after the people that haven't been born yet, and we put what we want today on their backs. That doesn't work with the American public. They don't care.
Right.
What the American public cares about. I know you may care. I mean, I want to make sure that we're talking, our audience, we know, the conservatives are left do care, but the majority of Americans don't. You're not going to guilt them on the horrible immorality of what we're doing to future generations. The only thing that you can get, I think, any type of positive feedback to cut is the fact when you tell people you felt it.
Yeah.
This is because of spending. And it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again and again and again and again. And interest rates aren't going to go down. If the debt keeps going up, interest rates aren't going to go down. I know the president's screaming, get interest rates down. They're not going to go down.
No. Nope.
You can even lower the Fed rate a little bit, and they're going to go, well, no, sorry. We're still keeping it up in the free market.
Yeah.
In the marketplace, interest rates are still going to be up there.
Yep.
And that's the things, that's the one thing that the American public seemed to respond to a little bit back then. Why? Their own self-interest. Their own self-interest was being harmed. So we'll get to more of that coming up. We'll hear from Rand Paul. Anti-Semitism, ton of talk on that. Over the last few days. We'll get to more of that coming up, plus the new poll out there, 866-98 Red Eye.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
After fuel, an owner-operator's second biggest variable cost is tires. To save, get as much life out of them as possible with good habits. Maintain proper inflation. It's free and easy, yet it's the highest saving maintenance you can perform on the truck. Improper inflation is by far the greatest reason tires fail early. Perform routine maintenance. If a technician can by hand initiate irregular movements in tie rod ends, kingpins, wheel bearings, and torque rods, that spells trouble. Fight irregular wear by replacing suspension components. On the steer axle, change your shocks at least as often as you change your tires. On the drive axle, replace shocks halfway through the tire's life, and when the tires are changed too. Finally, employ good driving habits. You have full control here. More conservative driving over rough surfaces helps reduce wear. Speeding, hard braking, curbing, and tight turns cause tires to wear fast. On the other hand, steady acceleration, braking, and steering can extend the life, saving a bundle. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section on the website for more details on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. We got a ton of audio cuts coming up. Plus, Michael Moore proposes a new Pledge of Allegiance. We'll have that coming up behind the bottom of the hour. He finally lifted his head out of the box of donuts and said, okay, what's going on? All right, let's come up with a new pledge of, because of Trump, let's come up with a new Pledge of Allegiance.
And for the public, more hot dog stands and liberty and mustard for all.
They have no self-awareness. They have they don't even realize that they're mocked now universally when they do stuff like this.
They don't. A new Pledge of Allegiance. Is he thinking, oh, this will get me attention?
Well, it will, but
it's not the good kind of attention.
Yeah, but it's mocking, but it's
a new Pledge of Allegiance.
You think about it. Remember when Michael Moore used to say something and people cared? Remember when Obama said something and people used to care?
No, yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
We'll get to that because I think that's a really interesting thing going on here.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. All right. Liberal wacko Michael Moore rewrote the words of the U.S. Pledge of Allegiance on Monday, asking his readers to unite against President Donald Trump and MAGA heads in the country.
All right.
The film director said he wrote the new pledge for the people and for the country that deep down, in spite of MAGA heads, in spite of its insanity, we've decided to fight for its survival. So here is Michael Moore's new suggestion for the U.S. Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the people of the United States of America and to the democracy for which we all stand, one person, one vote, one nation, part of the world, everyone, a seat at the table, everyone, a slice of pie with liberty and justice, equality and kindness, and the pursuit of happiness for all. Now, he had to include pie.
There's no way that was going to happen without food.
Right. We figured that. He had to put food in there. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and it appears to have caught fire, this new Pledge of Allegiance. I see it everywhere.
Well, it just popped into my mind when we were promoting this in the last segment. That remember when Michael Moore used to speak? I mean, people used to, this goes back maybe 15 years ago, be like, oh, Michael Moore said this, and Michael Moore said this. And the latest Michael Moore, did you know that Cuba has better health care than the United States?
Yeah.
Remember what's his name from MTV?
Kurt Loder.
Yeah. Remember Kurt Loder?
Right.
He's like 90 now. So.
Yeah. And he was old back when MTV started.
Remember Kurt Loder? That's not exactly true. Kurt Loder took down Michael Moore on that one.
Right.
Oh, yeah, Cuba's health care is better than America. Yeah, right.
Right.
The last time he
Sicko was the
Sicko, yes.
The movie that he put out. It wasn't a real documentary. It was a propaganda piece.
But I started thinking, nobody cares. Michael Moore speaks. I mean, we mock him. Yeah. Nobody really cares. I mean, Bill Clinton spoke the other day. It's like, nobody cares.
Yeah. Nobody is listening.
Obama.
No one is listening.
Obama talks. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Obama talks, and George Clooney's not even listening anymore.
Michelle talks. It's automatic mocking. And nobody comes to their defense either.
No.
No one.
No.
And so when you look at it, the ones that the Democrats are responding to is either Jasmine Crockett, AOC, Bernie, the most radical of them, or, as we have talked about, and it's been talked about here in the last couple of days especially, and I think it's because Buttigieg is leading it. Buttigieg says, I'm going to get a beard, and I'm going to talk about moving to the center.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when he talks about moving to the center and has got the beard, it's like Democrats get excited and say, okay, let's move him up to the forefront of 2028.
Yeah. Right.
Based on what he believes? No, based on the BS that he's throwing out there.
Yeah.
But nobody's really paying attention. I'm amazed sometimes they'll hit the Republicans on something. I go, oh, that's going to make news. The media's going to cover that. And they don't. And I'm starting to think that the media, in order to protect the Democrats, have the legacy mainstream liberal media, in order to protect the Democrats, are saying, that's just stupid. That isn't working. Let's not report that.
Yeah, right.
Oh, and nobody cares what Biden's saying. I mean, it's...
Well, it's interesting to see who's getting the attention on the left. The attention is one thing. Who is the driver? Who's the one driving people in any clear direction? Where people are responding, the rank and file on the left are responding saying, oh, that's what we need to do.
No one really. Right?
Nothing is catching fire.
Am I right on that, or did you have somebody in
no,
mind?
I don't.
All right.
I don't see anybody. I mean, there are AOC, Jasmine Crockett. They're making noise. Who's driving the response? Because before you would see it where that person or set of persons would be promoting whatever, and then on social media, it would catch fire. It would be, we need to, and they would repeat what those people are promoting. I don't see that anywhere. I don't see that anywhere. So, look, it doesn't mean people won't vote for Democrats. There are tens of millions of people that will still vote for them. But I don't know who that driver is. I don't know who's leading the party. It's interesting because I saw the story where Jen Psaki's numbers at MSNBC have dropped. Then you see the Jake Tapper book sales, and they're lackluster for what the book is. And his ratings have also gone down. And it could be temporary, who knows. But I question, in my mind, I'm asking, well, wait a minute. Is the left looking at this going, you guys were part of why the whole Biden thing happened in the first place? Jen Psaki, of course, was a very important part of that and covering that up. And Jake Tapper in the media, we all know, was doing it. Now he's pretending like he didn't. And my question is, are people on the left looking at that saying, you were covering... Now, this is the same rank and file left voted for Joe Biden in the first place.
Right.
So all of that has to be... That's the biggest qualifier in that regard. But are they looking at them going, you guys couldn't get it done. You guys are Biden ruined it for the party for a long time, and you're part of that happening.
I think it's, when you think of what's going on with Jake Tapper and the media in general, nobody in the liberal media is shamed, by what they did.
Right.
Nobody's shamed.
Right.
Jake Tapper, maybe a little bit because he's bowed his head whenever people confront him on the things that he actually said. But they really aren't. I think everybody's just looking. I think everybody's looking for another scapegoat. But I do think that if you look, for example, at CNN, and you even look at Jen Psaki and MSNBC, these are people that as you said, they lied to you over and over again.
Yep.
They lied to you.
Yep.
They took the side that Biden was fine, and you lost the election because of it.
Yep.
And so I think there are a lot of Democrats that look at it and say, well, now you're making it like, well, duh, everybody knew it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry, you sold it to us. You sold it to us. We supported him, and you knew it wasn't the truth. We never got a chance for a primary. And I think those things, you're not letting the Democrat voter, you talk, you accuse, and this has been out there. David Hogg talks about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far left as you can possibly get, saying, what are you talking about that Trump doesn't want a democracy? My own party doesn't want a democracy. They lied to us about Biden, completely lied to us. He wasn't capable. A lot of the things Biden, did now are all going to be questioned. This thing isn't going to go away.
Right. Right.
You're going to be able to indict every single Democrat, and I mean politically, I don't mean legally, indict every single Democrat of lying, of knowing, because the Republicans are going to look at it. And for Joe? You did it for Joe?
Right. Yeah.
When you could have had an active primary with and let us take a choice of everything, and you're accusing the Republicans of not believing in democracy and that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy? I think Charlemagne said the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're saying that Trump is a threat to democracy. You're the ones that won't let the Democratic Party be a democracy.
Right.
In the primary system,
Right.
You don't want a democracy.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that is a huge part of the problem. They realize that, because like most people, I mean, most people don't pay attention like we do, or maybe talk radio listeners do. And there are a ton of people, I meet them all the time, that are Democrats. They really don't pay attention, but they know the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But they really don't. Oh, no, try. He's fine. That's all. It's a right wing thing, that to go after Biden. But he's fine. He's fine. All of a sudden, it's Democrats saying, no, he wasn't fine, and everybody lied to you, and we lied to you too. We knew better, but we lied to you anyway. And you say, well, okay, yeah, but it's okay because we reached the goal of. Oh, there is no goal. We didn't reach it.
Right.
This backfired against us.
Exactly.
Oh no, we lost the election because of it. We lost the election because of your lies. And so they're looking at it now going, whatever. And then you look at what didn't work. Here's the other problem. What didn't work for them? Impeaching Trump. Lawfare against Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, Jasmine Crockett's out there. If I get to be on the House Oversight Committee, if we win, we're going to impeach Trump.
Right.
We're going to impeach Trump.
Right.
I mean, it's like the same thing over and over again of what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I can understand. Maureen Dowd said it. When things get bad, my Democrat friends just close the shades. They stay in the house. They turn off the radio. They turn off the TV.
Yep.
They just don't listen to anything. They don't
Right.
want to hear it. They just don't want to hear it anymore.
Right.
And that was before all of this. She said this years before.
Mm-hmm.
But everything, you think of it, everything has backfired. Can you think? I'm trying to go back and look at a political party and the things that they have actively promoted. Russia collusion. Everyone knows now. The whole Russia collusion thing against Donald Trump was a complete hoax, and it was orchestrated by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. We all know it.
Right.
It's a complete lie. Never happened.
Yep.
The whole Biden thing, a complete lie. And now you've got every Democrat scared that this thing will haunt them for the next 4 years because the Republicans are just going to pound on this. They're going to bring people forth, to testify under oath. And they're going to be able to find out whether, for the first time in history, it's been proven without a doubt because of congressional testimony, the Republicans may prove that there was a shadow government. And so the Democrats trying to use think about this. The elected president wasn't making the decisions.
Yeah.
You lose the ammunition that the Republicans and Trump are against a democracy. And you lose it big time with the biggest presidential scandal of all time.
Right.
Wow.
I mean, it's...
But you've got Michael Moore's new Pledge of Allegiance.
And it includes pie.
It's just the... What... Seriously, are there some new synthetic drugs or something out there that you and I don't know about?
I don't know what the kids are doing.
Because we can live in a delusional world and be completely and totally content, well, occasionally enraged.
Yeah.
But just content in our delusion.
Yep. It must be a good drug.
That's a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
Well, I'm completely delusional, but I'm not paranoid.
Right.
Well, no. I'm completely delusional and I'm paranoid, yet I still live.
Yeah, I'm still here. Wow.
866, and I can still listen to Springsteen. Sounds really good.
Oh, yeah, it sounds better than ever. Yeah,
it's a great drug. 866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Coming up following the top of the hour. I almost said bottom of the hour. I forgot where we were time-wise. Let me look at the clock here. Okay, we are on a Wednesday, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
We made it to Wednesday. All right. On the way, the latest on anti-Semitism, the big, beautiful bill. Where is it going?
Mm-hmm.
And there's something else. Oh, yeah. The congressional hearings on district judges.
Yes.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here this morning. As always, we appreciate it. You know, interesting here, looking at this was on X. Let me see. Yesterday. All right.
Okay.
After this was on the Washington Post online, at least 31 people were killed Sunday morning in southern Gaza, according to the Gaza Strip's health ministry, when Israeli troops opened fire on crowds making their way to collect aid. All right?
Yeah.
That stayed up there for a few days. And yesterday, the Washington Post. Correction, we've deleted the post below because it and earlier versions of the article did not meet the Post fairness standards. The background, early versions of the article on Sunday stated that Israeli troops had killed more than 30 people near a U.S. aid site in Gaza, with the headline attributed the action to, quote, health officials. The article failed to make clear if attributing the deaths to Israel was a position of the Gaza Health Ministry, which is whom? Hamas, or a fact verified by the Washington Post. The article and headline were updated on Sunday evening, making it clear that there was no consensus about who was responsible for the shootings and that there was a dispute over the question, while statements from Israel that it was unaware of injuries and that the initial inquiry indicated its soldiers did not fire at civilians near the site were included in all versions. The Post did not give proper weight to Israel's denial and gave improper certitude about what was known about any Israeli role in the shootings. The earlier versions fell short of the Post standards of fairness and should not have been published in that form. Well, look, there was a lot of darkness in your initial article. There was a lot of darkness.
Uh-huh.
You know where I'm going with this, don't you?
Yeah, because, the whole
democracy dies in the darkness. When you have the headline, at least 31 people were killed Sunday morning in southern Gaza, according to Strip's health ministry, when Israeli troops opened fire on crowds making their way to collect aid. You made that as a fact.
Yeah, right.
And that was the headline.
Yep.
Didn't matter what was in the article. That was the headline that you put up.
Right.
And they knew it.
Right.
Breitbart writes here, CNN persisted Tuesday in publishing fake news published by Hamas, claiming that dozens of Palestinians have been killed near an American-run aid site in Gaza, despite Israeli denials and a history of Hamas lies. Israeli government spokesperson David Mencer told journalists the IDF did not fire at civilians in or near humanitarian aid distribution zones. The story came a day after U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee demanded that CNN and other outlets retract the false reporting of dozens of Palestinians killed at a Gaza humanitarian Foundation site on Sunday. CNN reported its story under the headline, "Dozens of Palestinians Killed Near Gaza Aid Distribution Point," health officials say. In the third day of shooting, it cited the Gaza Health Ministry without noting that the ministry is controlled entirely by Hamas and has a long record of false and sensational claims, and reported that Israeli forces opened fire on Palestinians as they made their way to the distribution site. The IDF added the IDF troops are not preventing the arrival of Gazan civilians to the humanitarian aid distribution sites. The warning shots were fired approximately half a kilometer away from the humanitarian aid distribution site towards several suspects who advanced towards troops in such a way as to pose a threat to them. The CNN story said it only part of the IDF statement, leaving out the denial of the main claim. CNN also left out the GHF's denials and reported that aid had been delivered to civilians without incident. The incident marks the third day in a row that people have been killed on their way to the distribution point, CNN added, without noting that the previous reports have been false. Wow.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable. You know, and it's, again, this is where the whole thing with Jake Tapper's book, there is understand, and we really emphasized this yesterday, as we have many, many times before, do not expect CNN to change. Do not expect the Washington Post to change. Do not expect the New York Times to change. Do not expect ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS to change. They're not going to.
No.
Why? They're not journalists. They're political activists. They don't care if they get caught doing something wrong. They do not feel any shame. They just move on to the next piece of propaganda, half-truths, which are lies that they can put out there. And they don't care. There is no shame. So stop trying to shame them. There is no shame because they're doing exactly the job that they wish to do, which is political activism.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, and they really didn't fix it. The cover of their corrected article at the Post still says that Israel troops killed, Israeli troops killed 30. When you click on the link, then the headline is corrected after that. So again, it's this floating of and again, the lies. They need the propaganda. The baby was deported. We're deporting babies. I don't know if you've heard that, Gary. We're deporting babies with cancer. And we over and over again see it where they will, it doesn't matter. We have been saying, how long has it been at the Gaza Health Ministry? Hamas!
We've been saying it since, October 8th?
Well, I mean, it's but from
even before that, though.
Well,
even before that,
certainly,
yeah.
but it applies here, which is from the beginning. The Gaza Health Ministry, Gaza officials, it's Hamas.
Yeah.
These are supposed to be journalists. They're not. They're activists.
And
so when you put that into context, then this is exactly the same kind of activist that's out there at the protests and everything else. They just happen to have control of the Washington Post or CNN or whatever it is.
And the entire point is they're trying to set the table that there's Israel, there's Hamas, and then there's the Gaza government, which is an independent agency.
Right.
The Gaza government only there to help the civilians, and that's their only goal.
Health
is
ministry,
to make sure the health and welfare of the citizens.
Right.
That's the table that they're attempting to set up to communicate that false message.
Right. And in doing so, they're fully aware that they're helping Hamas. Because they're putting out Hamas's
they know it.
propaganda directly.
Yep.
And we have seen it countless times. When the Washington Post thing fell out yesterday on social media, I thought, well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that they even bothered to pretend they were correcting it. They corrected the story ultimately. But they left the headline for the longest time up there that was misleading, and knowing that people will scroll and go, wow, I can't believe Israel did this, and then move on and not read the corrected version. It's like putting the correction on something you get wrong at the bottom of they still have comics in the paper version. They still have a paper version.
Is Tank McNamara still a comic? Remember Tank McNamara?
Yeah.
He did the Nort Spoos.
Yeah, exactly. The Family Circus.
Oh, I remember the Family Circus.
Yeah, remember that? Yeah, Bart Simpson changed all that.
Remember Dondi?
Yeah.
I remember when Dondi, I remember a kid, the only time I ever read Dondi is when Dondi met, you show you how long ago this is, goes back to the mid-'60s. Oh, my gosh. When Dondi met Sandy Koufax, who was pitcher for the Dodgers.
Wow.
Way back then. It was,
Wow.
Family Circus was hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's still in existence.
Yeah.
Well,
probably.
wait a minute. Who reads the newspaper?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know. Is there a paper version? But they pretend like, and here's the thing, too. Why? Why even bother with the correction? What is that going to achieve for you at the Washington Post and your agenda at the Washington Post?
What is the motivation for it?
Yeah, right.
Guilt?
Right. I mean, I don't know anything that would motivate them and change their entire approach to everything.
Advertiser response?
Maybe. I don't know. But
it's not shame.
No, it's not shame.
Because obviously they ran with, if you run with the story that the Gaza Health Ministry is to be trusted this far into this war, well, then you're not even trying to be fair.
Yeah. Well, because it and early versions of the article didn't meet post-fairness standards. What? Post-fairness standards? Are you saying you weren't being fair to Hamas?
That's right.
That I would believe.
That's a great point.
Did Hamas call and say, hey, you guys spelled something wrong?
We might have got it wrong. The fairness may be we didn't treat Hamas fairly.
Right. We didn't give the enemy enough deference.
They really do believe the people that read the Washington Post are complete idiots.
They do, and they also know that a lot of people, and there are people that are willfully ignorant, that will scroll through, see the headline, and then, can you believe that?
Yeah.
And which is why you don't change the headline right away. You change the story. Oh, we made the correction. I don't know what motivates. I honestly don't know what motivated them to make the correction at all. Because it's been going on for a long, long time. It's like the media coming out now. I mean, I know why the leftist media, the activist media now is coming out and saying, oh, well, we didn't see it with Biden. They're trying to cover their own butts. Jake Tapper went as far as to write a book to cover his backside for covering for Biden. Because they had to have known the credibility thing was going to fall. They had to have known this is all coming down because Biden doesn't care about any of them. He doesn't care about his own legacy. Biden was in it for him, and the people surrounding him were in it for the agenda, and whoever was in control at any given moment, they were all a big part of this, and we all saw it as it was happening. Well, in this case, with Hamas and the Gaza Health Ministry, we've all known what it is. Are they trying to wake up and go, oh, yeah, well, we see, oh, that's not really, that's actually Hamas. It's not fair that we, why now? Why now? Let me ask you, does the horrendous terrorist attack in Boulder have any place in this when they see how far radicals are willing to go? Do they sit around the room and say, we got to change how we're doing this? I don't know.
The only thing I can think of is it has to be in each particular case, there is advertiser blowback. I don't know what else would change them.
Yeah.
I can't figure out what would be the
call
thing.
from Bezos?
Okay. Then there's a second point there.
Which I think would probably...
I forgot. Sorry. I blanked that he owned them
it.
and what he had said a few months back.
I mean, I think that would probably in part be advertiser related. But also I mean, if you're going to own something, I mean, I don't know why he bought the Post. I don't know.
That's a great point. That may be the number one thing.
Could be.
Bezos saw that and went, what the hell are you writing?
Right.
But to me, someone gets fired because I'm the publisher.
Yeah.
If I got to do the editor's work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If I have to do the editor's work, I don't need the editor.
Right. I can just own I can own a blog. Does anybody blog anymore? Blogging. But it's possible, quite possible, that he sees this because that affects everything else, too, in the Bezos universe.
No, that's a great point. No, I'm sorry. I blanked for a moment. I forgot he owned them.
Yeah.
And what he said a few months back.
Right, yeah. I'd be curious to find out.
I think that may be the number one reason. That's a great point.
Could be.
Axios, get on that.
Yeah, and let us know why it matters.
Right. 866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. We'll get some great audio coming up following the bottom of the hour, including Ted Cruz calling Cory Booker Spartacus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, the entire debate, I mean, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing on district judges and nationwide injunctions, which they should.
Yeah.
And, Democrats tried to make it sound like, well, because you're criticizing district judges, well, then you're threatening them in some way in violence. Mm-hmm. And they just went right after the Democrats with the Supreme Court justices. And remember the protest outside their houses after the Dodd's decision.
Yeah.
And saying, not one of you, as the Republicans were screaming, arrest these people, they're breaking the law. And nobody did. And not one Democrat came to our defense and said, this has to stop. This specific thing has to stop. And it was just, it got to be really, really interesting. Again, seems to be no game plan from the Democrats to win any argument right now.
No, when you're in when they're in the mode of the performance art thing, so you got AOC and Jasmine Crockett doing that, trying to go viral, trying to get your TikTok numbers up, and then the party scrambling post Biden to try and cover up, their participation in that whole thing, and then, just, of course, staying in the mode of hating Trump. The party itself doesn't have any direction. But I think that's really, in part, how the whole Biden thing, him not being in charge and the party having no leadership, actually happened. The party doesn't believe that one person should be they believe they're all the boss. AOC said it several years ago. I'm the boss. This is how they act now. I'm in charge. I'm the leader. It's all about me. Well, when there isn't that, if you're not going to invest in that person that's going to be a driver, if you're talking about 2028, if you're not going to have that kind of agenda, I don't know where you go. Pete Buttigieg is not it. Sorry. He may be in the moment. Why? Well, because he doesn't look as radical as all the others. But make no mistakes, he definitely is a radical.
And he's got the J.D. Vance look now with
exactly.
the beard.
Right. And he went to Iowa. I mean, Iowa. So he rides a bicycle, for goodness sake. So it's, there is no leadership. Well, the fact that Kamala Harris was at the top of that poll for a while of who, after the horrendous job she did in 24, tells you everything.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. All right, we cannot forget this story.
Okay, all right.
And it was actually out yesterday, and I just saw it again now, and I said, okay, no, you got to make sure you do this. I cannot forget this one. There was a study that was done. New data collected from the 2022 Cooperative Election Study from Tufts University and reported by statistician and political commentator Nate Silver.
Yeah.
Reveals that among voters who said their mental health was poor, 45% identified as politically liberal and 19% were conservatives. Conversely, those who said they had excellent mental health identified as conservatives 51% of the time, while 20% were liberal.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh, there's so many points.
Yeah, only 20% of liberals said they had excellent mental health.
Yes. Wow. And it's interesting because I'm just reading this editorial piece, op-ed piece by Ricky Schlott in the New York Post. Is it any wonder liberals are having a mental health crisis? And writes here, the stark differences between the two, the stark lifestyle differences between the two are illuminating. For one thing, Democrats have ceded a virtual monopoly on pro-family and pro-religious messaging to Republicans, the very values that can promote life meaning, interpersonal connection, and mental well-being. Conservatives traditionally promote family values, and it's long been known that people who have other people rely on them, like spouses and children, fare better than people who only worry about themselves. Ooh. Take, for example, Faye Dubinsky. Wasn't she in Animal House? A 28-year-old Zoomer who actually describes herself as a happy member of the most depressed generation. I'm sorry. On record. I take time for myself, but so much of my day is to help others, to take care of my family, to take care of my baby. Dubinsky, a mother of a 2-year-old, told the Post, people my age, their life is about them and serving themselves and always seeking out more pleasure. Some 86% of conservatives identify with religion, according to Pew, and religious people are more likely to self-describe as very happy in the United States, likely because they have a connection to a higher beyond an earthly world. I said that to somebody recently. Not even, relating it to this story at all, but I said it to somebody recently who said, I just get down and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, then go help somebody.
Yeah, get involved in something that is meaningful.
Yeah, I said, no matter how bad you have it, you're healthy. Somebody has it worse than you. Help somebody else.
Right.
It helps to give your life. If you wake up every day and say, what can I do? Because really, when you think about it, your lot in life, this is what I believe. My life is to serve others.
Yeah. No, it's something that I learned as an adult over and over again, and I believe that's that I believe that it's the teachings of God and what God wants you to do, and the purpose of being here in general. We are here to help others.
And I go back, if you want to relate it to politics, it was my dad. My dad was upset. Remember when Bush came up with compassionate conservative?
Yeah.
My father was not happy with that at all.
Right.
Because he goes, that's what being a conservative is about. He said, my objection to government is the fact that, if you look at it, he goes, merely on a return on the investment, they're less effective when it comes to helping people than private organizations.
Right.
And my father was involved in private organizations, and because of his example, so am I.
Yeah.
In helping private organizations that help people. But in my own life, I think the greatest joy that you get is not necessarily just giving people stuff to create a pathology of dependency from them because you're doing no service, but, to teach them that, because to me, happiness, and you can call it my faith, you can call it what I learned from my parents, my father, that you have purpose when you're serving others.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always just found that, to be true. And so when you see this here, when you talk about it, and religion, because a lot of people criticize organized religion, and a lot of people criticize Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've said, being a Catholic and, what are the sermons in church? It's always about you developing better as a human being and serving others. Because if you serve, the narrative is, the religious narrative is, you serve Christ, you serve others.
Doing those things, it isn't easy. It's doing things in life and also sharing that information, sharing knowledge that might help someone, gives them the tools to go on, with that. But the discipline has to be applied. Doing things is hard. Helping someone in that moment when they can't figure something out, right? When they seem to be overwhelmed, is one of those things that can be confounding. If you're there to help them, that's one of the things. For me, my approach has always been to help them sort it out and say, okay, let's lay everything out of what you need to do, and then help them apply, that effort. But it takes that discipline, and it requires that every day. But it is that gift you get from the work. The work is required. It's easy to be lazy, but the problem is you sit around fretting everything that's not getting done if you are able to do it, physically able to do it, there's no reason why you shouldn't get it done. In fact, you'll get greater, I believe, mental health from going through and being disciplined and going through the measures to get that done. Helping other people is a big part of that.
But also being productive yourself. Being,
Yeah,
as you said,
disciplines have to be
working, work ethic, everything else that gives you purpose in life.
On a plane, they tell you, secure your own mask before you help someone else. There's a reason.
Right.
You have to be strong in order to help someone else. And so that is exactly what I'm getting to. Those are the disciplines that you have to have in your own life, and sharing the information and helping someone, guiding them. It's best done when you're teaching a man to fish. That's where they gain from something, and next thing you know, they're accelerating or they're back on track or whatever it might be. I've had the benefit of people doing that for me, and I try and make it a practice anytime that I can. But I think, getting back to this survey here, a true mental health crisis is something that should be addressed. But also in a society where we look to gain attention for ourselves every day with multiple ways of doing that. We have, people have how many different accounts devoted to themselves, devoted to getting attention for themselves. And when there is that, it is always going to end up empty. There's not going to be that fulfillment. There's not going to be, I don't believe, that kind of true joy unless you make that a selfless effort. And I think that's ultimately the best practice. It's what, if you're, it doesn't matter how you vote, but we tend to see people on the left, you and I talked about, when they talk about, well, I was talking to my therapist and I was talking, it's almost as if they want to promote that in order to get the attention for themselves, in order to portray themselves as a victim. I don't want to demean a true mental health crisis for any individual, because that's never a good thing. But it's also not a good thing to promote that, and if you're asking for help, then it should be direct, it should be very clear, and you should seek that help if you truly believe you need that help. That's always a good thing. The difference is when you're going, people that are in the media, people that are popular, that have a following, if you're not using that to help others and you're just making it about you, I don't get it.
Well, I think we had a discussion off the air one time, and it was, I forgot what I was looking at one day, but it was like I came in and I think it was off the air. I told you, I said, my God, I was watching this interview here and this interview here with all these Hollywood celebrities and musicians, and they were all talking about their therapist. And I went, Erica, it was like it was virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Like, I have a therapist, therefore I'm working on myself. And it was like, but I was just amazed how these people, and they're very well-known people, and obviously, unless it's part of their comedy act,
Right.
because they weren't in a comedy bit, we're doing an interview saying, well, my therapist, and I work on this with my therapist, I work with this. I'm like, really? And not that some people don't need therapists, but I just, that one day I came in,
but it's like, how they promote it.
Yeah, it almost became, virtue signaling. But then you talk about the other things, too. In fact, I was having this discussion the other day with a young person, and I said, look, when it comes down to it, the only security you're ever going to have in your life is the security in your ability. And, I know that part of the philosophy that I grew up with is again, that work ethic, the fact that I'm not a victim. And even if I am a victim, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything.
Right.
That you've got to ignore those things. You've got to move forward. You've got to be productive. You've got to be aggressive in life, but you still have to be fair and kind and everything else. But when you look at, we have a generation, I remember you and I talked about this after Occupy Wall Street. when Bernie Sanders was coming out and saying that anybody who's a young person today who's in college, the reason you can't make it, that you can't make it because of the billionaires. And remember, you and I said, who the hell does that? Who the hell goes to young people and says you have no chance to make it? Number one, it's false. Number two, why do you do that?
Right.
Why do you do that? Why do you go and if over and over again you're told you're a victim, that you're a victim and you can't make it, and you hear that 24 hours a day, you're brainwashed all your life to be told you can't make it, you're a victim. Well, I don't think you're going to end up being a happy person. I think you're going to be a depressed person. And then we talk about the emotions that, come in from the left. For example, we talk about the, what they teach in the Democratic Party, judging people by groups and not individuals. Well, why do you do that? Because you got to blame somebody else for what your lot in life is.
Right.
You look at the radical transgender movement, you go, how the hell can you have that philosophy? It's so insane. It's bizarre. It just doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And then you realize, well, no, everybody's a victim. I belong to the party where everybody's a victim, and we got to find another oppressor out there. When you're focused on stuff like that, instead of having a productive life for yourself and a life of serving others, you really don't have any purpose.
Right.
What's
if
your
you've truly
purpose?
been convinced of that, then you're going to live that mentally.
Yeah. And what a terrible place to be.
Yeah, it is.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Talking about the study that was done and reported by Nate Silver that liberals report having much more mental problems than people that say they're conservative. But when you think about it, when you believe you have no control over your life at all, when you think about this, you go through life every day, you're a victim. You're being oppressed. You can never accomplish anything because you're told you can't accomplish anything. You have no control of your own destiny at all. Well, isn't that the equation for having mental health problems like depression?
And you're also told that the opposition is going to put people in jail.
Right.
And,
yes.
And, all of these things that aren't true. And if you're only paying attention to that, it will definitely have that effect.
Yeah.
There's no way that it won't.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. I'm just reading more of the Nate Silver study that was done, Tufts University, on liberals versus conservatives. I'm just reading Federalist.com. Democrats are the party of mentally unstable nut jobs.
Yeah. But I also think that they're in part, if you look at Nate Silver's job, it's to, all right, let's get the numbers, let's do a poll. So the respondents, it goes back to what you and I were saying, that we've seen celebrities that have been very active about going, oh, the other day I was talking to my therapist about, and it was kind of nonchalant. They weren't in this mode of, look, I go to therapy. It's okay for you to go to therapy. And they weren't doing it in this effort to help other people. They were making it about them. That's a very different approach and a very different purpose. And I thought, well, that virtue signaling is likely there with the rank and file. And I think that's why, in part, you're seeing a lot of them. I do believe that many of them, if they're following what people in office and other prominent people on the left are saying, I do believe that it creates a mindset of, oh, my gosh, we're doomed, coming from the guy who said for a long time, we're doomed. It's, again, you mentioned Bernie. You can't make it in life. The billionaires, you can't do it. You can't do it. But that's indoctrination that's been going on for the longest time. It's not just listening to Bernie. It's what they teach in school from the earliest of ages. They will teach children that the world is, only a big government can help you. Only powerful people can help. You need to rely on this. And then when adults, you need to rely more on the government. The government needs to do more for you. You remember Obama, who said the opposite of what JFK said. With Obama, it was what you need to be asking the government to do more for you.
Right. Yeah. That's
and it really is. And everybody was, too many on the left were comparing him to JFK. And it's like, have you guys listened to him even talk? And so that mindset certainly is created, again, when you indoctrinate, when you teach people all of their lives that's what life is, that you're not going to make it, and we're going to give you a passing grade just for existing. We're not going to keep score on the ball field, because that would be wrong. Everybody gets a trophy. All of these things, and then life hits, and in a somewhat still free society, you get out into the real world and you get kicked to the curb over and over again. I think also what perpetuates this whole thing is the mentality that the left took and the policies that the left and the messaging that the left was responsible for during COVID. It was for them the perfect political environment to grab control and gain more control over people's thoughts. And when you're teaching people that, oh my gosh, it's such a dangerous world out there, and government will help you get through it, and government will supply everything you can work from home. Don't even leave your home. And now, coming out of that, a few years ago, people were like, oh, we still don't want to work from home, to the extent that the very liberal administration, the Biden administration, was still letting government workers work from home.
Yeah. I remember, again, with the many talks that I had with my father, and that's why he's such a big influence on me, even still today, is when we were talking and this is when I first got into talk radio. He said, and so this goes back a while. He says, you actually get to do a job where you get to talk about government. He goes, and it's very important to talk about government because they take taxes and everything else. He said, but he said, people need to realize it doesn't. And John Taffer said this one time too. Mm-hmm. John Taffer said, it doesn't matter who's president. It's got nothing to do with whether you make it or not.
Right.
And you think about it, the same thing when Bernie Sanders was telling people after Occupy Wall Street that, well, if you're in college today, you're a young person, you can't make it because of the billionaires.
Right.
And you think about it, a billionaire has nothing to do whether you ever make it or not. You think about that, just saying that statement itself is so absurd.
Right.
I'm trying to think. Okay, once I met a billionaire. Once. And that was Sam Walton. True story. Opening up the Marshall, Texas Walmart back in, doing a radio broadcast. And this is back in, 84? 85, I think it was. And they had a Kmart, but they didn't have a Walmart. And so I remember saying it because one of my old dear friends who passed away a few years ago, I'll never forget, he's the one that heard it, goes, oh, man, I nearly fell off my chair because I got on there. And I'd done so many live broadcasts from Kmart as a radio announcer.
Yeah.
And this was the first one from Walmart. And Sam Walton was on his way. This is when Sam Walton would visit the opening of the new Walmarts.
Right, yeah.
And I said, here we are. Welcome to K Walmart.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you just said that, and Sam Walton's on his way in here.
Yeah.
He's coming, he's coming in. He's probably listening to the local radio broadcast. Well, I'm sweating bullets,
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Sam Walton's going to come up.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I met him and shook his hand. He said, you're doing a great job, doing a great job. I said, oh, great. I have no idea whether you heard me or not.
Yeah.
But that's really the only time I've ever met a billionaire, I believe.
Mark Cuban?
I never met Mark Cuban.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
never
right.
met him in person.
Yeah. Me?
Have you? Well, that's right.
We've been accused of being billionaires.
I forgot that one. And the guy, remember, he called the one time. He called and he said, well, you guys are billionaires. You said, no, come on, really? You think we're billionaires?
Yeah. Right.
He said, yeah, you are. I go, well, we're not. He goes, yes, you are.
And he made it sound like such a negative. I know you guys are billionaires.
Yeah.
Billionaires.
And then we wondered, does he understand what a billionaire is?
Right. Exactly.
How much money you need
Right.
to be a billionaire?
From what I'm told, it's at least 1 billion.
Yes.
I could be wrong.
And I'm not a billionaire.
Yeah.
$999 million in assets is not being a billionaire,
Right.
damn it.
Right. Ask Forbes. They'll tell you. I'm not on any of their lists.
Well, that might have been the time where I even put in my net worth one time and it came up $400 million.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell are they talking about?
Yeah.
And then it disappeared.
Right. Yeah.
And I've
The 400 million or the Post?
the Post. Well, it's in the Cayman Islands now.
Yeah, right. All of a sudden, it's gone.
Yeah, I made sure it's in the Cayman Islands, and and I'm not getting taxed on any of it.
Yeah. Well, and there was, for the longest time, there was this, and I had to work hard against it. There was this rumor that went on about me, even after I was working here, that I married my wife because her uncle left her a ton of money. And it really was infuriating because I would have married her no matter who left her that money. I love you, honey. I'll see you here in a couple hours.
But here it is. It goes conducted, because this is from the Federalist.com, just their look at it. Conducted by researchers at Tufts and Yale universities. Now, understand, this was not done by conservatives. Mm-hmm. The study, published April 30th, found that conservatives self-reported having higher rates of positive mental health than their liberal counterparts, according to a graphic summarizing the data released by left-wing election statistician Nate Silver, and that's true. 51% of conservatives describe themselves as having excellent mental health, while only 20% of liberals said the same. I'm sorry, that's wow. Seriously, it's not funny, though, because it just shows you the brainwashing of pathology of dependency and victimhood does to people, and it's actually not funny.
It isn't. When you see people that are angry a lot, there's a great amount of distress behind that. If you talk about the psychology that is so politically driven, again, we go back to indoctrination. But think about that. When you're told over and over again, when you're not taught about failure, if you look at some of the greatest minds, in fact, all of the greatest minds, had to go through a great deal of failure in order to learn to get to where they are or were. It's required. But we wanted to eliminate, the left wanted to eliminate failure. You know, they wanted to make sure that no one ever had to deal with anything when all you're doing is saving that up for one big harsh reality that would be delivered over and over again when the real world had something to say about it. And it's no wonder. And they still, when they become old enough to vote, become grown-ups, are dealing with that and are being told lies about Trump and the opposition, as well as you can't make it and you must rely on the government. There's no other way for you to get through. Because the thing is that there is a way, but it's always hard. It's never easy.
Yep.
It's not easy to get to a point of success. It takes a long time, but it takes that discipline and it takes that work. And you have to have that discipline and work in practice every day.
I've never thought that way first. The first thing is I want my freedom. The reason I worked during college and even in high school is I didn't want to be under anybody's control. It's not that I loved to work. I didn't say I love to, I do now, but back then it was simply, what is the way to more freedom and autonomy? That's what it was about. And it was like, oh, work? Yeah, let's go do it.
Well, and I never had a price. I never had an amount of money in my head. It was being able to live below my means, but having enough money that would help me have that security and freedom. It wasn't a certain amount. Well, I want to make $1 million before. I mean, I know people do that and they have their own goals, and you can talk to them about that. For me, it was about, all right, I am going to have to provide, because the one thing I've always wanted to be since I was a child, because of my parents and our family, I wanted to be a father. I wanted to have a family. And in order to do that, I knew I had to provide. So I wanted to be able to provide and have that freedom. That was my goal.
When it comes to working and things like that, I heard an actor say this, and I went, wow, that's me. And the actor said, I simply want to make enough where I can continue to do this for a living.
Yeah.
And I went, wow. That's always been the goal. Just I don't care whether I'm a billionaire. I just want to be able to continue to do this profession because that's what I like. And if anything relates to, doing this, that was the minimum requirement in my head.
Right.
Because you just want to make whatever it is that I can do. And do this means not just do the radio show, but have the right thing behind it, which means the freedom and creativity, the editorial control, the creative control of that, which is not about money.
Right.
It can be when you get to a certain level, but that's not the goal. There was never an amount set. You were like me. I never sat there and went, I need to be worth $20 million someday. Never said that. Never even thought about that.
No.
Never really thought about money.
No.
Except when I didn't have it. I wanted enough money to pay my own bills and be self-sufficient.
Right.
But other than that, neither of us, even though we're both savers, none of us worship money. We never have.
Well, no, for me, it's about having that freedom, being able to, even though my kids are grown, it's about being a provider. It's about being able to provide for now me and my wife, and both of us in our retirement years later, down the road. Older Eric is going to need to eat. I always say that. And those kind of things go over in my mind over and over again. So you do the work, you show up, you have the discipline, and you do something meaningful in a thoughtful way. And when you apply that every day, good things can happen.
You know, you brought that up about providing. It just brought into something I want to talk about when it comes to anti-Semitism, because we wanted to get to that also, and all the narrative on that the last couple of days. Coming up next, 866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on compliance, safety, accountability. Compliance, Safety, Accountability, or CSA, is the FMCSA Safety, Compliance, and Enforcement Program. Its goal is to hold motor carriers and drivers accountable for highway safety and to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities on our roads. CSA does this by assessing the safety performance of motor carriers and drivers based on data collected during roadside inspections, crash reports, and FMCSA investigations. Based on the data that is compiled, motor carriers are assigned a score. The carrier is then grouped with other carriers who have had a similar number of safety events. Carrier scores within the group are then ranked to determine intervention priority. Low scores are better, so carriers with the highest scores are those that are most likely to be targeted for intervention by the FMCSA. Interventions range in severity and may include warning letters, roadside, off-site, or on-site inspections, civil penalties, or operation out-of-service orders. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
Hey, Trinidad Radio, he's our calling. I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up, anti-Semitism. You know, you look at, just for example, Mohammed Solomon, and the fact, think about this. You find out he has 5 kids and a wife.
Yeah.
None of that meant anything to him.
Nope. His hatred.
The hatred of Jews. Because remember, this is something that we know now because of the evidence that exists out there that's allegedly been in his mind for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
Significant period of time to kill Jews. His kids didn't mean anything. His family, because it's all destroyed now.
Yeah.
It's all gone.
Right. Yeah.
He didn't care. Think about how propaganda and hate and everything that we have, talked about here. Just think about how people become so obsessed about it that their family means nothing to them.
Right.
The survival of their family means nothing.
Right.
Versus the act of murdering.
Right. Yep.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he's our calling. I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Well, the media seems to be talking about anti-Semitism. Duh. This is Beri Weiss on with Morning Joe. Here we go. All right.
I think the reason it feels different, Joe, is if we think back 5-6 years ago to the massacre that happened at the synagogue where I became a bat mitzvah, Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, where 11 Jews were massacred, there were 2 key differences. The first one is that the person that was radicalized seemed mentally deranged. The second thing is that there was universal condemnation and outrage by the surrounding culture. It was front page news. No one had any trouble condemning it. No one had any trouble calling it for what it was, which was absolutely evil. So fast forward to these 2 recent attacks. The perpetrator in the case of the D.C. rampage, the murder of Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, 2 names that should be known to everyone in this country, but you will see no celebrities making videos making sure that we know and say their names. He was extraordinarily articulate. He was evil when you read his manifesto, but he was an incredibly coherent, if not morally upside down worldview. So that's the first thing. He was radicalized by a movement that has created a permission structure for violence and the hunting of publicly recognized Jews in this country. The second thing is the unbelievable silence of the surrounding culture, and if not silence, open glorification on the part of some leftist groups that are celebrating this attack. That is the core difference that we've seen over the span of those 5 or 6 years. And I think one of the things that's been so alarming to watch in this country is that since October 7th, the open anti-Semitism in this country has become more profound, not less. And I think it's profoundly unfortunate that people do not understand the history and do not understand that what begins with Jews does not end with Jews. Fundamentally, what this is about is an attack on the rule of law, attack on the idea that individuals, minorities in this country should be safe, and fundamentally an attack on the West and on America itself. What starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. And the lesson of history, unfortunately, is people often don't realize that until it's too late.
Beri Weiss on MSNBC. Whoa.
Yeah.
Then we go to Fox News, and on Special Report, they got into the discussion of the anti-Semitism.
Josh, your thoughts on how this White House is handling the moment?
Look, I don't trust anybody more than I trust them on dealing with the visa issue and the immigration side of it. But I think that the larger issue that Ben is talking about has to do with the culpability of this rise in anti-Semitism in this country. And the way I look at it, the culpability really lies within a Democratic Party that has treated the roots, at least the roots of anti-Semitism as a political constituency. And then you've had a whole bunch of legacy media outlets that go back and forth and treat it as a he said, she said game. And what's happened is it's provided this permission structure for, hey, look, nobody's out there chanting two-state solution, two-state solution. It's from the river to the sea, which means to basically eliminate the state of Israel and all the Jewish people from this planet. When you look at it through that lens, it's hard to see a difference between that and saying, like, oh, let's see what the KKK's thoughts on the latest issue of the day is. Of course, we would never do that in the American political system, but somehow over the last 6 months, 2 years now, really, since October 7, it's a he said, she said type game in the American media, and I believe that that is a lead contributor to what it is that we're seeing.
Josh, just got a minute left.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has made Elon Musk the most significant industrialists.
Okay, they moved on to that, but and you and I would say, and that's Josh Holmes, and he's does a podcast Ruthless, where I would disagree with him is, if you say two-state solution, it's the same thing.
Right.
Because nobody wants to sit there and say that the solution is something that neither wants is, in my opinion, pro-Hamas.
Right. Well, you're saying Hamas has a right to exist.
Yeah.
Because tell me what in today's world, in 2025, what a two-state solution would look like. Well, it would be essentially what we have right now, Hamas in existence. And now ask yourself the question, do you think they would give up on their mission to annihilate Israel? And the answer is no.
Well, think about this. When you go back to the campaign of last year, when it came to Harris picking a candidate for vice president, and it was out there. It was like, we were like, wow.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party is actually admitting we cannot pick a Jew.
Right.
The media is admitting they can't pick a Jew.
Shapiro's name was, I think, probably at the top of everybody's list. He was certainly getting most of the conversation.
And it's like, we can't because the anti-Semites in our party won't vote for the ticket if he's... And it was viewed as just, well, it's just normal. I mean, it's just, we all know. I mean, it's no big deal. I mean, it's just like, and that's where he comes to he was calling it the he said, she said, but there's like sort of an acceptance. Well, no, the anti-Semites, it's almost as if we recognize that the Democratic Party has this horrible problem of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And the funny, I want to get to the one thing, the last audio I wanted to play, because this was, I believe this was, okay. Oh, this was on CNN, where you've got the one Democrat operative trying to make the case that Trump is the one. Trump is the one that's created all this anti-Semitism. You cannot make that case.
Nope.
You just can't. And I'm trying to see if I can find it, and at the moment I can't find it here. I thought I had it.
Well, that's the go-to for too many. Well, this is because of Trump. It's because of Trump. It's because of Trump. Now, this hatred is very much alive on the left. They're promoting it. And they're proudly anti-Semitic. You see them. We've seen it since October 7th. As Beri Weiss points out, there's been a much greater presence of it since October 7th. And it is clearly on the left. And those in the party just refuse to come out and condemn it. They just look away as if nothing's happening.
And I think starting this is Chris Sununu here on CNN. I found the audio cut here. Here we go.
We need a cultural change. Students and kids under the age of 30 years old, this is prevalent. This is commonplace. Even the kids that aren't showing up on those campuses think that there's a massive problem with Israel and we should all support Hamas and Gaza. These are the same people that say, well, it's about the women and children that are being killed. It did nothing about the 300,000 people that were murdered in Darfur or the 500,000 in Ethiopia. They're picking and choosing their self-righteousness.
You don't think it has anything to do with Donald Trump's anti-Semitic rhetoric and the tropes that he actually puts out there?
But Maria, I do think we have to take the point that he's making, which is that in the last, 18 months, since October 7th, the rise in anti-Semitism is clear. Like, that is not a Donald Trump thing. That is a clear outgrowth of this particular moment that we are in. And Trump has his problems, but I do think you have to acknowledge that there is something going on here, maybe a permission structure that...
Okay. That's the third permission structure in 3 audio cuts.
That's the third audio cut in a row.
Yes, with permission structure. Well, Walsh, you succeeded.
Drives me crazy. Permission structure.
Permission structure. Wow. But that was Maria Cardona, a Democrat operative who's just been screaming the last couple of days. It's because of Trump. The anti-Semitism is Trump. It's not Trump.
No, it isn't.
Stop it.
No, the left owns this.
And anybody who comes out on the right that's an anti-Semite is called out immediately.
Yep, as they should be.
Yep. Or anybody who claims they're on the right. It's sort of the same thing as when people these days say, well, I'm more conservative than you. And it's like, well, let's go point by point on the topic because I bet you're not.
Yeah, when we hear that qualifier, we long ago came to learn that they're about to espouse some very liberal views. But the left owns this anti-Semitism. And they have for a long time. And now the activists are just very blatant and blunt about it. And
I'll never get over the whole vice presidential pick.
Yeah.
And Josh Shapiro last year. I mean, it was absolutely the most blunt thing, as if it was normal.
Right.
Well, yeah, they can't pick Josh Shapiro because, he's right. What do you mean? Because he's a Jew. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
Let's go a step further. What does that mean?
Right.
Well, there's a ton of he can't win because Democrats, won't vote for him.
Right.
It was like you saw the Joy Reid. She's claiming not anti-Semitism, but she was claiming racism for one of the reasons she got fired. She worked for MSNBC.
Right.
Like, wow, there's another one saying, well, I'm a liberal and we're racist and we're misogynist and we're just everything and we support the Democratic Party fully, but that's what we are. And then I become a victim of this same Democratic Party and Democratic establishment. And there's she probably said there was a permission structure within MSNBC
permission structure
that allowed that to happen.
Yeah, but it's also further indication that there are no leaders on the left. Everything is about me. No, I'm the big victim. No, you're not. I am. Remember, Rachel Maddow had to come out and call out her own company for being racist.
She did for the Joy Reid firing. Right. That's right. Oh, my God.
And so that's which is why nobody really rises to the top if you're talking about 2028. Because nobody can. Everything's about me. I don't care about anybody else. Who's going to lead? Who am I going to follow? That's the question. It's not who is a leader. It's who wants to follow anybody else. I'm following me. Have you followed me? I'm pretty great. I'm following me. I'm the boss, AOC. That's who they become.
That's great because in politics you need a group of people to rally around you and follow you.
Right.
And people, because of social media, are much more sophisticated.
Right. And now
here's a question. Could Obama win today? Could his rhetoric win today? Now, there's no correct answer there. It's just something to think about because it's a hypothetical.
Well, what would be working against him is exactly what we point out, is that, look, everything is about me, 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 me. And even those running for office, they want people to vote for them. As they point out, this is the me generation. Everything is about me. Well, with the left, it really is. They don't. I think Obama would not resonate because in 2008, AI will tell you what hope and change means now. In 2008, you didn't have AI to tell you. But he was able to. It was a blank canvas, hope and change. Here, you fill it out, and that's what it will mean to you. And politically at the time, it worked. And it's not just that we lived through 8 years of him being in the White House that would work against him. If he were able to run again, let's just say he were able to run again. But really, if he were coming in as a new candidate, either way, that kind of stuff he was doing in 2008, I don't think would work. Could he do something new and get elected? Well, again, like you say, you'll never be able to know that. But what he was using in 2008 wouldn't work.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
We are Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Download our Red Eye Radio app today. Why? Because our show ends in just a little over an hour. We have an hour left, and after our show is done, it becomes a podcast. So if you didn't catch the whole show and want to catch all of it or more of it, you can do so. Or for some reason you can't listen to one of our great radio stations that carry us, and thank you so much. That is our preferred way. But if for some reason you can't, we stream all 5 hours live on our Red Eye Radio app.
And thank you for listening.
Yep. Rand Paul. The president goes after him. His ideas are crazy.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.